Hello everyone. Today we will meet again with author Nguyen Oren, an author who is also very familiar with the channel. A very good collection of stories. The story is titled The Village of Crime. Brutal deaths have often occurred in this village. And finally, a reason that will surprise all of us. Please listen. And don't forget to click on the product search in the left corner of the screen to order and learn about Feng Shui spiritual products. Support Due Thuan and IP to have more funds to develop the channel for a longer time. Thank you very much. Please listen to the story below. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed on the deserted road of Jayapnad village. Looking out was a young man carrying a basket and running out of breath as if someone was chasing him from behind. As he ran, he shouted loudly, "Dead, dead villagers." The dirt road of the village, after the days of heavy rain, became more bumpy and slippery than ever, and it made the young man stumble many times. But as if he didn't feel pain, every time he dropped his head to the pillow, he would immediately stand up and continue running. When he got closer to the village, the dim light from the houses helped him calm down a bit. He stopped, breathed a sigh of relief, thinking back to the image just now. It was a corpse that looked like it had just been murdered. It was unclear if it was a man or a woman. When the victim's face was scratched until all the skin was gone, blood splattered and pushed onto the branches and grass nearby. But the most terrifying thing when thinking back was the chest cavity of the body. It was unclear what weapon the murderer used, but the victim's chest was torn open, revealing the internal organs still covered in blood and mucus. Thinking back to that scene, the young man couldn't help but use his strength, but his fear didn't allow him to stop for long. Taking a breath, he picked up the bush and continued to run faster towards the village. "Hey Tuong, I just saw you carrying the bush. Why are you already back?" While he was running happily to report to the village chief, a man's voice echoed into the young man's ears. Immediately after that, a flashlight flickered and shone straight at him. "Uncle, is this Chu Due? Someone died in that ditch, Uncle." I was so scared that I rushed back here to tell Uncle Min. "What did you say?" Uncle Dewey's eyes widened in surprise when he heard Tuong's words. Then he quickly ran inside the house. In a flash, a flashlight flickered and stood in front of the general. The flashlight was still shining on the ground. Mr. Due asked again, What did you say? Who died? Who died? There was a dead person on the bank of the ditch. I was just going out to pick some bushes and almost fell while I was walking. But you don't know. That person's death was very scary, Uncle." Tuong was scared and pointed and stammered in response. "Are you serious?" Mr. Due didn't believe it and asked again. Tuong pointed straight to the sky and replied, "I swear to God that if I say anything wrong, I will be beaten to death. Just deny it. If that is true, then quickly go tell Mr. Min." Mr. Due waved his hand, then pushed Tuong forward. Seeing Mr. Dewey's action, Tuong put the basket on his shoulder again, nodded his head and ran. He thought he was still alone, but after walking a short distance, he saw a flashlight shining from behind. Turning back, it turned out that Mr. Due was also running after him. "Go slowly. Wait for me." Hearing Mr. Due say that, Tuong slowed down. Because in the middle of the night, the two of them went straight to Mr. Min's house, who was also the head of Jayapnad village. When they got there, Tuong looked in and saw the lights on and called out loudly, Mr. Min, something happened, something happened." Inside the house, a tall and thin man wearing a tank top came out and looked at Mr. Due and Tuong. Mr. Min asked, "You two didn't come in the morning, so why did you come here at night?" "Someone died in the village, Uncle," Tuong quickly replied. After hearing that, Mr. Min's expression immediately changed to one of surprise mixed with worry. Mr. Min asked again, "What? People die? Where did you die?" Tuong pointed randomly, recounting what he had just seen outside the ditch at the beginning of the village. After listening, Mr. Min nodded and walked with the fence, leading everyone to the ditch where he had just stepped in. Tuong slowed down and borrowed Mr. Min's flashlight, his mouth also warning in advance. That color looks terrible. If you guys see it later, don't be afraid and run away. This guy, we are not children to be afraid of. Hurry up and lead the way. Mr. Min replied harshly. After hearing that, he thought he would not react anymore and continued to shine the flashlight to search. There. Tuong stuttered and widened his eyes. The light now stopped at one position, occasionally swaying slightly because his hands were shaking violently. The others heard what Tuong said and also shined their flashlights over. When there was enough light, everyone was gaping and their eyes were wide open in shock, just like what Tuong had described on the way. The bloody death of this victim made everyone who saw it feel horror and shudder. At first glance, if the victim and the perpetrator did not have deep hatred, no one would have done such a savage thing. What should we do now, Uncle Min? Mr. Dewey stammered as he asked Mr. Min. Faced with this horrifying scene, Mr. Min's thoughts seemed to be in turmoil. The simplest way now was to report to the police. However, Mr. Min had not thought of it yet, and this needed someone else to remind him. A death this serious must be reported to the police. Yes, this must be reported to the police immediately. Mr. Min clapped his hands, suddenly remembering. Then he glanced at the others and continued. Okay, now it's like this. You guys stay here to protect the scene. I'll run over to the shaman's house to inform him that someone in this village has died. Yes, you go ahead, we'll keep watch here. Mr. Dewey nodded in response. Looking urgent, Mr. Min didn't say another word but grabbed the flashlight and ran straight up the dirt road. The remaining people standing here, their eyes fixed on the victim's body. The smell of blood at this moment, carried by the wild wind, made everyone feel uncomfortable. Walked away a distance. The flashlights and eyes of everyone still did not leave the scene and were discussing. Looking at it, the victim must be a male and about the same age as a straight man. Mr. Dewey said to the people next to him, I wonder what kind of conflict could have caused such a poison. Another person nodded in response. Killing someone and taking out their heart. This matter might cause a riot if it reached the people. On the other side, Mr. Min had already arrived home. Without any time to rest, he pushed his bicycle and rushed out the gate, ignoring the voice of his wife singing behind him. Where was he going so hard this late at night? Holding a clean flashlight in his hand, Mr. Min squinted at the road ahead and pedaled. In no time, he cycled to the other side of Jayap village. The village roads and alleys here were not much better than those in the first village, even a bit quieter. Apart from the occasional barking of dogs, there were only a few faint lights from the houses singing. Zitch. The bike stopped in front of a spacious house with a large yard. Looking inside the house and seeing that the light was still dim, Mr. Min called out loudly, Uncle Dong, is Chudong home? After only 2 calls from inside the house, Mr. Min saw the vague image of a middle-aged man walking out. His tall figure, accompanied by firm muscles, looked very muscular. Is that you, Mr. Min? It's late. What's the matter with you coming to my house? This person is the shaman or the police chief of BT Commune. It's too much trouble for you to come here at this hour, but something happened in my village. Mr. Min answered without regaining his composure. Come inside and sit down and drink some ice water. What water? There was a murder in my village, so I had to rush over here to tell you. Hearing that someone had died, Mr. Dong's face lost its calmness. He nodded and told Mr. Min to wait outside the gate for him for a moment, then quickly ran inside the house. In addition to changing his clothes, he also contacted his other colleagues to come and support. In a flash, the person riding the motorbike, the person riding the bicycle, both had returned to the field next to the village. Here, people like Mr. Dewey Tuong and the others were still standing there, and no one had left yet. Seeing Mr. Min and Mr. Dong coming, they walked over. The two returned. After exchanging a few greetings, the few people walked together to the scene. Standing in front of the body that reeked of blood, Mr. Dong had to shake his head in dismay. In his many years in the industry, Mr. Dong had encountered many murder cases. However, this was the first time he had witnessed a victim die so tragically, and it seemed impossible to solve the case himself. Faced with such a serious crime scene, Mr. Dong himself did not dare to make rash decisions. Thinking for a moment, he took out a brick phone from his pocket and walked to one side. Holding the phone in his hand, Mr. Dong quickly pressed the button and called someone. After a few long rings, someone picked up on the other end. He talked to the other side for about 5 minutes before hanging up and returning to where everyone was standing. Looking at everyone, the shaman said, "It's getting late. If you don't have anything to do, you should go home and rest. You still have work tomorrow. Let us, the police, handle the matter here." Even though the shaman had such an advantage, no one wanted to go home at this point. They were here, so at least they wanted to hear the initial conclusion from the police. No one left. They stood there chatting animatedly for about 30 minutes. Suddenly, the atmosphere became quiet. Their eyes looked up towards the beginning of the dirt road, where the headlights of the cars were coming one after another. At this time, Mr. Dong spoke up. They must have arrived. The people who came down here were the district police comrades. As soon as they arrived at the scene, they quickly got to work. There was also the deputy captain of the investigation team, Mr. Quan, who let his colleagues work, while he himself went straight to the shaman's place with everyone else. After asking a few people, Quan learned that they were the ones who discovered the victim. After nearly an hour, the investigators finished checking the crime scene. At this time, a policeman walked over to Quan and said in a low voice, "We have the results, sir." Hearing his colleague say that, Quan nodded and went with the officer to a secluded corner. Quan asked, "You stay and speak." Based on the scene, the initial cause of death was determined to be that the victim was stabbed in the chest by a sharp object, leading to his death. Hearing his colleague's report, Quan was not surprised. He nodded. "Okay, you guys clean up the scene. Bring that young man back, too. He was the one who discovered the victim. We need to take his statement." Pointing towards the door, Quan nodded again. So just over an hour had passed. The scene of the case had been cleaned up by the police comrades and left. The people who were there earlier saw that there was nothing more to do, so they told each other to go home. Now, there were only cold winds and the smell of blood. Without having to wait long, the next morning, the district police identified the victim. This person's name was Tan, 25 years old, and he lived in Knot Village. When mentioning Tan's family situation, people sympathize with him because the family only has a mother and son. Tan's mother, Hoa, is over 50 years old and often sick, so she can't do any work. For a long time, she only stays at home to raise chickens and ducks, occasionally taking them to the market to sell to earn some money. All the living expenses in the family depend on Tan. Now, when she heard that her son was murdered, Mrs. Hoa could not bear the shock and fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she looked like a person who had lost her soul. No matter how much attention and encouragement was given, Mrs. Hoa's emotions remained the same. People were also worried that if this continued, one day or two, she would become exhausted and fall ill. By then, there would be no one left in the house. I'm afraid that on the police side, after taking Tan's body back for further examination, they will realize that the cause of Tan's death was not due to any impact, but in fact he was killed by some kind of poison. However, at that time, the professional skills and supporting technology were still a big obstacle. It made it impossible for the comrades to determine what the poison was, and keeping the victim's body at the medical facility would not help any further. So in the end, they just kept the samples and returned the body to the family for burial. Hopefully, doing so would help the victim's relatives feel more at ease. Back at work, the district police chief, Mr. Kwok, was sitting in his office with a sullen face. He had also sent someone to investigate Tan's recent relationships to see if he had ever had any conflicts with anyone. Because other than starting the investigation from there, he couldn't think of any other options. However, after a short investigation, the results were not very positive. When in the village, Tan was known as a gentle and kind person. The old and young in the village were very well liked. To say that there was any conflict with anyone, there was definitely no conflict. With such a dead end, the only thing left to do was to rely on the remaining samples. As for the village, after the death of the citadel, only one day had passed, but the next day the villagers were already gossiping loudly. The good people sympathized with the family, while the bad people used it as an excuse to fabricate blatant lies to make the villagers uneasy. Some people even believed that Tan's death was caused by demons, because only demons would cut open a living person's chest to take out their heart. And faced with such unfounded false information, Mr. Min, the village chief, could not accept it. He immediately went to each person's house to work on their mental health. After 3 or 4 days, the rumors about Tan's death subsided a bit. However, that peace did not last long, as another heartbreaking incident suddenly occurred. And this incident also happened to another young man in the village. This young man's name was Hai. This year, he was over 20 years old. His family was in a normal situation. Both his parents were still alive. That day, Hai was asked by his father, Mr. Dam, to go to the district to get some medicine. He had a backache, and in this rural area, there was no one who worked as a traditional healer. So whenever the pain was too much to bear, he had to ask him to go to the district to get some medicine to drink. The road from his house to the district was not far, about an hour by bike. So Hai was in no hurry. It was around 2 p.m. when he leisurely picked up his bike and left. He only went to the district once every few months, so everything looked new to him. Hai did not go to the herbalist right away. He stopped by a few shops to rest and watch the hustle and bustle of the city. It was late afternoon, when the sun was already setting, that he slowly went to the herbalist's house to get some medicine. After the herbalist prescribed some medicine, Hai paid and leisurely left. Riding his bike on the road, the scenery in his eyes was getting darker and darker. When he left, he didn't think it would get dark so early, so he didn't bring any lights. But luckily tonight the moon was bright, so his movement didn't encounter too many difficulties. At around 8 p.m., Hai finally arrived at the village entrance. Looking at the lights of the people in the distance, Hai Thap entered and then returned to his leisurely and relaxed appearance of cycling, his mouth still tilted up to play the flute, which sounded extremely pleasant. But after going a short distance, Hai felt something following him. It stopped the line of cars, its head tilted left and right. And just at that moment, a loud scream rang out. After that, the space returned to its usual silence. No one went out here at night. So the incident was not discovered until the next morning. Villagers. It was still dark when people heard the shouts outside the village. The people around were awakened and rushed out. In a moment, the place was filled with people, talking excitedly. Now lying in the dry ditch was a corpse that had turned pale white, just like the victim before. This person's body was also ripped open at the chest, causing the internal organs to spill out. Another common point that could be observed with the naked was that the victim's heart was no longer visible on the body. Another person died. Quickly go and report to the village chief. An uncle spoke to the remaining people. Okay, let me run back and tell you. Another person replied, then turned around and ran away in a panic. The remaining people were now looking at the body lying in the water, feeling discouraged. They wanted to bring the body to shore, but then thought that it would only affect the scene like this. So the crowd stood there, but could not help at all. They just kept pointing and gossiping to each other. Not long after, Mr. Min and a few others came running over. As the village leader, they needed Mr. Min to give some instructions. However, besides standing there dumbfounded before the deaths of two villagers, what else could Mr. Min do? After a while, he turned around to reassure everyone. The police were about to arrive. If anyone had any work to do, they should go home first. Avoid gathering here and affecting the investigation. That said, no matter how busy they were, no one wanted to go anywhere. They wanted to stay here to hear a clear explanation from the police. Then, very quickly, the police appeared again. Looking at the body lying in the ditch, everyone's face showed disappointment. Because Tan's death was still at a dead end, now another person died in a similar condition. So, how could they ask them to investigate? Could it be that they just verified the identity and returned it to the victim's family, and that was it? At another location in the village, teacher, there is another death in the village, teacher. The person who spoke up, running back and speaking, was Tuong. Looking inside the yard of his house, there was now an old man with white hair tied up high. He was sitting calmly leaning against a longan tree, leisurely turning the pages of a faded book. Again, mentioning the old man's appearance here, Tuong had no family relationship with him. The story is that a few days ago after Tan's incident, he thought he had been stable at home for more than 2 days before he dared to go out with his bushes. It was also late at night. At that time, he was sneaking around a ditch near his house when he heard a strange sound as if someone was following him closely. It was dark and he had a flashlight on his head with a dim light, so he looked around. When the light stopped, he cringed because in a bush about 15 steps away, he thought he saw something red staring at him. At that time, he thought he still didn't know what to do, but from somewhere, he saw an object flying straight towards the bush. Right after that, there was a rustling sound of running away. The red thing also disappeared. Turning his head to look out on the small path 5 steps away from him was an old man dressed strangely. He looked at Tuong and asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Tuong replied blankly. Then he rummaged around a bit and carried his basket up to the bank. "Who are you? It seems like you're not from this village." Tuong asked suspiciously. He wasn't from here. He happened to pass by this village, saw something bad, so wanted to stop here to take a look. The old man answered, his eyes showing something sincere. He mentioned the thing just now. Tuong wondered, "What is that, old man?" The old man did not answer, but slowly walked over to pick up the thing he had just thrown. It was an ancient sword about 2 spans long, and put it back into his sleeve. He returned to where Tuong was still standing, bewildered, and said it was a demon in human form. After he finished speaking, the old man left. Tuong heard the answer and still didn't understand. Startled, he chased after the old man, constantly asking, "Is it a demon? Can you explain it to me? And where are you going now?" Seemingly bothered by Tuong, the old man stopped, his eyes fixed on Tuong. Then he said, "It's the thing that took the life of the young man the other day. Now, if there is nothing else, you should go home. And especially don't go out at night again. Today, it's lucky that I showed up in time. Otherwise, it would be difficult for you to keep your life." After hearing the old man's words, Tuong didn't say anything, paying attention to the way he was dressed. Tuong then spoke up, "So then, are you a shaman?" The old man smiled, then turned around and continued walking. Thinking of chasing after him, he walked side by side with the old man and asked, "You are not from this village. It is already night time. Where do you plan to stay?" "There is a temple at the end of the village. I have been staying there for the past few days." The old man had answered all of his questions. Now he should go home. The place the old man was talking about was not far away, with a temple near the old man's house, only a few dozen steps away. The story of that temple is not clear, but I heard that it worships an old lady in the village, and only on holidays or other days do people come there to burn incense. At noon, on normal days, it is very deserted. The grass and trees are also cleaned by the surrounding people. That temple is right next to my house, otherwise I would go home and rest. Tuong happily invited the old man to his house. He did so partly because he saw that the old man was old and that staying in a cold temple like this could easily affect his health. But on the other hand, he wanted to keep him because what he had just mentioned was more precisely the problem that this village was facing. After hearing Tuong speak, the old man stopped, turned to look at Tuong intently, then said nothing and quietly continued walking. When he reached the gate, Tuong turned to open it, but seeing that the teacher was still walking, he immediately went up and blocked the teacher's way. "My house is over there. You can go in and rest. Although it's not spacious, it's more convenient than a temple over there, teacher." The old man didn't answer, his eyes fixed on Tuong. So Tuong continued, "If you hadn't appeared in time, I'm afraid you would have been in danger. Now you stay here and rest. Consider it as helping me repay your kindness just now." Hearing Tuong's sincerity, the old man no longer refused. He smiled and nodded. "All right, then during the time I stay here, I will stay at your house. I'll bother you." "Oh, it's okay, teacher." Tuong smiled respectfully and replied. That night, while we were talking, he thought he knew the old man's name. People often called him Master Van. Master Van was from NNN. A week ago, he went to PX to perform a ceremony to move the dead for a family there. Now, he was on his way back. When he passed by this village, he heard something unusual. So the teacher decided to stay here for a day to check it out. And thanks to today's encounter with that thing, the teacher knew that there was a ghost here. After listening to Tuong, Teacher Van sighed, "Someone died again?" Tuong nodded repeatedly. "Yes, that's right, teacher. That person died in the ditch where the police just brought their body up. The corpse was also ripped open and had its heart taken out just like the other day, teacher." Teacher Van shook his head and muttered, "I've been searching for that thing for days now, but I haven't found any trace of demonic energy. Could it be that there's a place here that can hide that smell? Teacher, what should we do now, teacher? 2 people have died in a week. If this continues, I'm afraid." Tuong said to Teacher Van in a trembling voice, "Okay, you go ahead and do your work and think a little more." Hearing what Mr. Van said, he became silent and nodded, then went to a corner to chop wood. Mr. Van sat as if thinking about something. Then he stood up. His hand was also placed on his shoulder by the teacher. Seeing that, Tuong stopped and ran back immediately. "Teacher, where are you going?" Teacher Van did not answer. He sighed and then turned around and walked out. He thought he wanted to follow, but seeing his appearance, he stopped. Maybe it would be better to let him go alone. Walking on the country road, Teacher Van heard many rumors about 2 deaths of people. It had been several days here. Bad things kept happening. However, not once had the teacher witnessed the scene with his own eyes. His suspicions were still fragmentary thoughts. He proactively stopped to talk to some people. The teacher was pointed to the place where the crime had just happened. When he reached the ditch where the crime had just happened, the teacher walked around it a few steps, but all that was left were dried blood stains stuck to the tips of the grass. Slowly bending down, Mr. Van picked a blade of grass covered in blood, then held it up to his eyes to observe. The blood had dried, but instead of being dark red, it was pitch black. Mr. Van observed carefully, then shook his head in confusion. The venomous snake observed the area once more. In the end, it seemed that Mr. Van had discovered nothing more. He silently walked back to Tuong's house. "Teacher, are you back? Has the sky returned yet?" Teacher Van ran out to ask as soon as he stepped through the gate. He just nodded slightly and then went straight inside. "Teacher, did you find anything?" Looking at Teacher Van's expression, Tuong had already guessed the result, but he still wanted to ask. He himself was not sure now. Maybe he had guessed wrong. Master Van shook his head and replied, "Wrong guess? Can you explain it more clearly? Tuong asked in surprise. Master Van stared at Tuong, then nodded slightly. It's possible that this incident was caused by humans, because when we arrived at the scene, we didn't find any traces of demonic energy, and if there was any, it was very little, not at all like it was left by a demon. Hearing Mr. Van's answer, Tuong did not ask any more questions. His face also slightly drooped, looking like he was thinking a lot. So the thing Mr. Van said the other day, he thought he was suspicious again. Mr. Van did not answer. His eyes revealed a deep look. Maybe it was a person. 1 or 2 days passed. The information about the murders in the village remained stagnant. Only the rumors of the people spread more and more wildly. After a few quiet days at home, Mr. Van took his first steps. Instead of waiting for more people to get into trouble, this time he took the initiative to find the source of the thing that was causing these terrible crimes. He wanted to see if it was really caused by demons. Instead of going back to the crime scenes to look for clues, this time Mr. Van wanted to go to the cemetery of Knot Village. It is a place where the dead are buried, where the yin prevails and the yang declines. If ghosts really exist in this village, then they must originate from here and not from somewhere else. Without thinking further, Teacher Van called Tuong back to his place and said, "You don't need to go out to work today. Stay home and help me with some things." Hearing Teacher Van say that, Tuong nodded immediately. "Yes, if you need anything, please tell me. Take me to a place." Master Van nodded again. "Where do you want to go, sir?" Thinking of asking about the cemetery of this village, he seemed quite surprised after what Master Van said. But thinking back, Master Van was doing this job and was now hesitating between the thoughts of whether the murder was caused by humans or ghosts. Now to be sure, it was one of the two. So we have to find out one thing at a time. And it is not strange that Mr. Van came to this burial place. "Yes, let's go now." Tuong asked again. Mr. Van did not answer. He nodded slightly and put on his shoulder bag. Walking on the village road, the two of them saw many people gathered together talking. And what they were talking about was nothing more than the series of cases that had been happening in the village recently. Master Van and Tuong did not pay much attention to that. However, the villagers who saw the two of them walking together, especially Master Van, were surprised. Besides glancing at them attentively, a few people also waved Tuong over to ask about the person walking with them. Thinking that he was sober at this time, he did not reveal the identity of Mr. Van, only said that he was a relative of his, and that he had to pass by here for some business, so he stayed here to play with his nephew for a few days. Thinking that his answer was clever was correct, because in the midst of people's rumors that this matter was related to ghosts, a shaman appeared here. This only made the villagers more confused and suspicious. The two of them continued walking together. In no time, they had left the village and headed towards the cemetery. When they arrived, looking at the quiet and somewhat cold scene before them, Tuong turned to Mr. Van and said, "This is the cemetery of Knot Village, teacher." Mr. Van nodded. It was indeed a burial place for the deceased, surrounded by vast fields. No houses, no trees, everything was so deserted that it was hard to lose weight. Tuong then walked around with Mr. Van. Cemetery. Before each grave, both stopped to light a stick of incense for the deceased. Halfway through the area, Mr. Van suddenly stopped, his hand raised as soon as he saw him stop. Tuong immediately pulled out an incense stick and was about to light it, but he was stopped by Mr. Van. "Wait, this grave doesn't need to be lit." Tuong was confused. "Why is that, teacher?" Teacher Van looked away from Tuong and asked, "Do you see anything unusual about this grave?" "Unusual?" Tuong shook his head vaguely. "Yes, this grave is different from the others in this cemetery." Then Teacher Van bent down and picked up a handful of soil from the grave. He brought the soil up to his eyes and observed it carefully. Dropping the soil, Mr. Van once again bent down, placing his hand on the highest part of the grave. His eyes closed tightly, as if he was feeling it. Then he turned to the wall and continued. This was the place. But did he mean that the devil was down here? Tuong still did not understand and stammered to ask Mr. Van. He tried to observe carefully again. According to the position of Mr. Van's hand, he thought that the top of the grave was slightly concave, but that did not seem to make people feel unusual. There were hundreds of reasons for the grave to form that concave. It was just a normal concave spot on the ground, Mr. Van. Mr. Van withdrew his hand and looked back at Tuong, smiled and shook his head. If he guessed correctly, there were absolutely no dead people in this mound. To be more precise, there was no burial at all. There was only an empty coffin. An empty coffin. Xianggao couldn't believe it. Master Wan nodded with certainty. That's right. Okay, let's go home now. Having confirmed this far, things seemed a bit easier. Master Van said and then turned around and walked away. Although he had many doubts, when he saw the master leave, he did not dare to stay. On the way back, although he still had many doubts in his mind, he wanted to ask a lot of questions. But when he turned to see Master Van still walking leisurely, he did not dare to ask. And only when they both got home, thinking he could no longer control his curiosity, did he say, "Master, if you know that there is an empty coffin down there, then could it be that the demon you were talking about is it?" Master Van looked at Tuong, he sighed, then slowly replied, "That." This old man could not confirm, because he did not know what had been buried there before. That was the reason he wanted to come back here to ask him some questions. Without waiting for him to reply, Mr. Van asked immediately, "Do you know about that mushroom? According to what I observed and felt, this mushroom must have been built up only a month ago. Is that right?" Hearing Mr. Van's question, Tuong shook his head with a bewildered expression, but then as if remembering something, he suddenly said, "I don't often go to the cemetery, so I don't know what my mother's grave is like there, but if you tell me about the past month, I think I know a little bit. Because about a month ago, it's true that in my village, someone died of an epidemic." "The person died of an epidemic?" Master Van asked thoughtfully, puzzled. "That's right, Master. The person who died was a 20-year-old girl. When a ceremony was held, the family said that she died of a strange epidemic, so not many people came, Master. Oh, not to mention that the girl's father also worked in the same profession as you." Tuong continued to say this, making Mr. Van somewhat surprised. His thoughtful eyes suddenly looked up at Tuong. Then he said, "Do you work like him?" "Yes, his name is Tan. He is also a famous shaman in this area. Sometimes I go to his house and see a lot of people come to see him. That's why his house is the most spacious in this village. No joke." Hearing Tuong say this, Master Van was silent for a moment, then smiled slightly. How interesting, the dead person was the daughter of a shaman. Could it be that Master Tan's daughter was the demon who had caused the recent murders? The thought flashed through Tuong's mind, making him feel guilty. He couldn't be sure about this yet, because clearly at the crime scene there was absolutely no trace of demonic energy. If there was any, it was very little, very difficult to detect. Master Van nodded vaguely, saying what he was thinking, and did not let the statue ask any more questions. He continued, "But if there really was a dead person buried under that colored mushroom, then the mystery must lie there. So what should we do next, teacher?" Tuong asked. Master Van did not answer, his expression returning to a thoughtful state. After a long while, he did not dare to disturb him, but with his silence, Tuong became impatient, so he asked, "Haven't you thought of a way yet?" Master Van then looked at the statue and replied, "If that thing down there has really turned into a demon, then I will destroy it. By then, if there was someone behind it, they would definitely show up. And that person could very well be the one who had caused the recent crimes in the village." Tuong replied without thinking. Hearing what the teacher said, "It must not be difficult for you, right?" Teacher Van did not answer. He smiled slightly, a smile that was somewhat unconfident. "It is difficult to answer now, but don't worry, we will have a plan. Master Wan then reached out and pulled the hand back towards him. He took it off and took out the inkstone and a brush from inside. He turned to the statue and said, "Help me spread this ink." With that, Master Wan stood up and walked outside. He walked over to the pile of straw in Tuong's house and took out a small handful of straw. When he returned, Tuong had just finished grinding the ink stick into the inkstone. "What you taking out the straw for, teacher?" Tuong asked, confused. He would know in a moment. Teacher Van answered, then focused on the bundle of straw in his hand. After a few steps, a straw-woven mannequin was created by Teacher Van. He looked at the effigy with satisfaction and then slowly placed it under the table. At the same time, he took out a roll of red thread and a stack of colored paper money from his hand and gave it to the monk. Master Van Bao sat in the temple a few steps away from his house. "Now take the effigy and this roll of red thread and hang it in front of the temple gate. I asked for this money. Then go to the market and buy 2 roosters for him and bring him back here." Although he didn't know what to do with it, Tuong couldn't help but nod and silently follow. Perhaps now he knew that he was a person with limited knowledge. Even if he asked Mr. Van to answer, he still wouldn't understand. Just silently following and implicitly understanding was fine. After Tuong left, Master Van began his main task, which was drawing talismans. He took a stack of unmarked yellow talismans from Nai's hand, placed them next to the inkstone. He took out 3 sheets and spread them out in front of him. With his other hand, he held a brush pen, brought it to his mouth, and dipped it on the tip of his tongue before lowering it back down to the inkstone. The first strokes were drawn on the talisman, and with just a few bends of his wrist, Master Van had finished drawing 3 talismans and placed them in a corner. After cleaning up the pile of things on the table, Master Van then sat down leisurely and drove Tuong back home. After about an hour, the sound of chickens clucking could be heard from outside the alley. Looking out, I thought he was running back quickly. He was carrying 2 roosters with their legs tied. I bought the roosters, teacher. I also hung the effigy outside the temple, just as you told me. Standing in front of Teacher Van Tuong, he put down the 2 roosters and then said, "Okay, that's it for now. We'll continue in the evening." Teacher Van nodded in satisfaction. Tuong said yes. Yes. Then he picked up the 2 chickens and put them in the kitchen corner. However, he had just turned around and taken 3 steps when he stopped and put the 2 chickens down. Tuong reached into his pocket and took out a few bills. He turned back to Teacher Van and respectfully handed them over with both hands. "Oh, here's the change from when he bought the chickens." Seeing Tuong's action, Mr. Van smiled and waved his hand. "You keep this extra money. When I need to buy something, I will tell you." "Okay, then you hold it for me. When I need to buy something, just tell me." Tuong happily nodded, then turned around and picked up 2 chickens and walked towards the kitchen corner. Looking at the sky, it was now noon. He suddenly remembered that he still had to cook. So without resting, he put the 2 chickens in the corner of the kitchen and immediately started cooking. Master Van was no longer sitting at the table. He stood up and walked outside, and the place he set foot on was none other than the temple near Tuong's house. When he arrived at the temple door, his friend only glanced at the effigy hanging outside the door and did not say anything about it. The sad man opened the door and stepped inside. Even though it was noon and the sunlight outside was harsh, the temple was quite small, and the windows were few and tightly closed, so it still felt a bit stuffy and dark. It was worth bothering with this place. Master Van muttered, then walked straight to where the breathing statue was placed. He bowed slightly, then knelt down, clasped his hands together, and bowed 3 times. He looked extremely respectful at this moment. After finishing, Master Van did not stay long. He walked around to play something before leisurely leaving. When he got home, he saw Tuong was taking care of the cooking, so Master Van did not ask any questions and went straight inside the house. After sitting for more than 15 minutes, Tuong brought a tray of food from downstairs. Looking at Mr. Van sitting there, he seemed surprised. "Oh, you're back already. Where did you go?" It's not comfortable staying at home, so he went out for a walk. Mr. Van smiled and replied, "Yes, the food is ready. Please come down and eat." Tuong nodded respectfully and invited Mr. Van. "Thank you." Teacher Van nodded slightly and sat down on the mat. Just like the previous days, the meal was simple. The two of them ate together in an atmosphere without any worries. And thanks to these meals, the two of them got to know each other better. The sky gradually turned to evening as the sunlight began to fade. The smoke from the kitchen spread out from the tile roofs when Master Van Bao Tuong brought out 2 chickens. "Are you going to butcher them now?" Tuong asked. "Yes." "Now give me a hand." Master Van rolled up his sleeves and sat down. The knife that Tuong had brought out and placed on the ground was also held in his hand. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Now, I might not be able to eat the meat until late at night, Master." Hearing Tuong say that, Master Van laughed. "It's not good to be too early." Master Van then signaled for Tuong to hold the chicken tightly while he plucked the chicken's feathers, muttering something as if he was reciting a spell to this poor animal. Immediately after that, there was a clean cut on the chicken's neck, blood spurting out with a sizzling sound. Master Van quickly directed the red blood stream into the bowl. The chicken that had its blood drained quickly became lethargic, then struggled a few times before becoming still. After finishing the first chicken's blood, Master Van picked up the second chicken and pointed it towards Tuong. "I plan to slaughter both of them at the same time later," Tuong asked in surprise. Master Van did not answer, but only nodded slightly. The action was repeated again, and in no time, the 2 chickens were lying quietly in the aluminum basin. Teacher Van then put the knife in the basin and said to Tuong, "The rest is up to you." Tuong did not mind the work and smiled and waved his hand. "I'm butchering 2 chickens. What dish do you want me to make?" "No need after cleaning, just put them in the pot and boil them." "That's too simple." "Okay, just leave this to me," Tuong happily replied, and Mr. Van didn't say anything else but stood up and turned to go inside the house. Following his instructions, Tuong boiled water to pluck the feathers, then put the 2 chickens in 2 separate pots to cook. By the time the chickens were done boiling, it was already dark. Tuong put the chicken on a basket to drain, then ran inside the house to tell Mr. Van, "The chicken is done boiling, sir." "Okay, just leave it there and don't take it out to do anything." Mr. Van sat inside the house, his eyes focused on the book in his hand. Hearing Tuong's voice, he raised his eyes slightly, then nodded slightly in response. His eyes also returned to the page he was reading. Seeing that the teacher was so focused, Tuong did not ask any more questions but quietly walked over and sat down opposite Mr. Van. The sky gradually darkened, and Tuong's stomach was now growling with hunger, and the sound of drums was heard. Mr. Vanu also realized this. He put down the book he was holding, looked at Tuong, smiled apologetically, and said, "I completely forgot. I'll take you down and cut a chicken, then you and I will eat. Leave the remaining one like that. I'll use it later." Hearing what Master Van said, Tuong said yes and then stood up and ran straight to the kitchen. The sound of knives and chopping boards rang out, and in just 10 minutes, Tuong had brought up a tray of food from downstairs. The plate of chicken was neatly arranged by Tuong, looking very beautiful. "Teacher, please come down and eat." Spreading a mat and placing the tray of food down, Tuong respectfully invited Master Van. After a full meal, his stomach was full and his eyes were round. Tuong happily said to Master Van, "It's been a long time since I've had such a comfortable meal, teacher. And who do you intend to give that chicken to?" Master Van laughed after hearing that. He raised his hand and shook his head. "No, I want to bring it to the temple on the other side." "If so, Why didn't you tell me to bring it over early in the dark like this, and then you're confused and ask again? I've said it before, there are some things that are not good to do too early. Okay, sit down and rest for a while to get your meal down. Then the old man and I will go over there. Still with a gentle smile on his face, his teacher replied, thinking that he didn't ask anything more after that. Sat down to rest for a while. Then, following Mr. Van's instructions, he carried the boiled chicken and walked with him to the temple. Why did he bring the offering, but not the unboiled blood? On the way to the temple, Tuong realized that Mr. Van was carrying a bowl of chicken blood. At this moment, he couldn't help but ask in surprise, "This thing hasn't been boiled yet. Are you planning to bring it over to offer as an offering?" Master Wan smiled when he heard that. "This thing isn't for offering." After a few more sentences, the two of them had arrived at the temple door. During the day, there was sunlight, but it still felt gloomy. Now that the sky and earth were completely dark, that appearance was revealed even more clearly. Just looking at the dense vegetation covering the roof of the temple, Tuong felt a chill down his spine and said to Mr. Van, "It's so scary at night here, it doesn't look like a place to pray at all." Mr. Van still had that smile. He turned to Tuong and said, "Don't be mistaken by this appearance. It may look a bit gloomy and scary, but this is a place with extremely good spiritual energy, suitable for the old man to borrow this place to create a magic formation to exterminate that demon." "Really? So you intend to use this place as a place to exterminate demons?" Tuong's eyes widened in surprise at what Master Van said. After all, this was a place of worship for the villagers. If they came to pray for good luck, then it would be fine. But if they did not come to do such unbelievable things, then it would be true that they should have gone through the villagers or at least reported this to the village chief. However, now that the two of them were acting so freely, if someone were to find out, it would not be good. That would not be good, teacher. If someone saw it, it would be really difficult for me and you to explain to the villagers. If things got worse, you and I would even be suspected of being the ones causing the incident in this village. What Tuong said, Mr. Van had already thought about. But if we said that the incident in the village was caused by demons, how many people would believe it was true? And what would those who didn't believe him think? Would they leave him alone so he could do as he pleased? Because of those restrictive thoughts, Master Van made his own decision about this matter. He then turned to Tuong, his eyes showing solemnity, then clearly asked, "Do you believe what the old man said?" Before Master Van's question, Tuong looked difficult to answer. "If you don't believe me, I won't force you. You can go tell the villagers about what I'm about to do. And if you do, things will only get worse." Master Van's eyes still didn't leave Tuong's as he continued. Tuong also looked up at Master Van. It was clear that through the days he lived with the Master, he had placed his complete trust in this old man. "I believe in you, Master." After hesitating for a few seconds, Tuong finally nodded firmly in response to Master Van's words. Master Van didn't say anything after that, but she nodded slightly. In the dark, the two opened the door of the temple and stepped inside together. The flickering candlelight was also lit by the two of them right after that. After placing the chicken and offering incense, Master Van turned to Tuong and said, "Today we will stay here to lure that demon here. Stay here to lure ghosts." I imagine you're a bit confused after hearing what Master Van said, but if you're scared now, you can go home to rest. I also have something for you. After saying that, Master Van took out a yellow talisman from his pocket and gave it to Tuong. No need, I'll stay here with you." Tuong immediately waved his hand to refuse to accept the talisman, and Master Van did not force him. He put it back in his pocket, smiled and nodded, then sat down on the ground, his back against the ancient pillar, then continued, "Let's take a nap whenever we can, otherwise when that demon appears, we will have a very hard time." Tuong himself looked at Teacher Van's appearance right now and was very worried. He had just refused so quickly, but in a moment of fear, he had already decided to leave. But thinking about it, he was alone, so he might as well stay with the teacher. If something happened, the two of them could still help each other better than one person. At the same time, at the house of the village chief Min, nearly half a month has passed, but the information about the two deaths of the villagers has not gone anywhere. This has caused indignation among the villagers. As the village chief, Mr. Min also feels that he is incompetent for not being able to give a clear explanation to the families whose children are victims in this matter. Sitting at Mr. Min's house at this time was also Comrade Quan. He appeared here partly to ask again about the incident when the people discovered the body. Because now the investigation work almost had to stop because no more clues could be found. On the other hand, he also came to discuss with him about the situation in the village. The village told him about the situation, hoping that he could encourage and reassure the people's spirit before the police announced the final results. But in just a short time, the rumors about the two cases did not only revolve around the village anymore. It spread from one village to another. And through each telling, the story was slightly changed. If this situation continued, I'm afraid that it would directly affect the lives of the people. Not a little they asked from Mr. Min. After listening to Kwan's encouraging words, he also nodded thoughtfully. He had already done the job of reassuring the people, not that he had not done it yet. However, it was their mouth. He could not stop it. Okay, the cadres did not need to worry about this. I would meet with the villagers to discuss it with them. Thank you for troubling me. As for the investigation, we will try our best. Give us a little more time, we will definitely bring the culprit to light. The two of them sat and talked for a while longer. Realizing that it was already late at night, Mr. Kwan did not dare to bother Mr. Min's family anymore. He asked for permission from the family, and before leaving, Mr. Kwan did not forget to say, "Don't worry, we will definitely clarify this matter as soon as possible. We will not let two people die unjustly like that. Thank you for the enthusiasm of the staff." Mr. Min then saw Mr. Kwan off to the gate. Standing there, the two of them exchanged a few more words before Mr. Kwan got on the motorbike and left. He had not gone far on the motorbike when he suddenly stopped, and the lights were immediately turned off, causing both him and a motorbike to almost blend into the darkness. Kwan acted strangely because before that, he seemed to have seen someone's silhouette fading before his eyes. How could anyone go out on the street at this late hour? Could it be that they didn't listen to Mr. Min's warning? Kwan looked at the silhouette that was gradually blending into the darkness and wondered. He thought to himself that Dinfai should check the phone and ask who it was and why they were out on the street at this time, but immediately dismissed that thought. What if the person in front of him was the culprit who had committed two crimes in this village? And with that question flashing through his mind, Kwan thought of a better solution. He gently put the motorbike down, then got off the bike and quietly followed the shadow in front. If it was a normal person walking in the dark like this, with limited vision, he would quickly lose track of the person in front, and even if he could, he would be easily discovered. But Kwan was different. He was a police officer, someone who had gone through years of training. So this was not difficult for Kwan. He knew how to keep his distance from the person in front, and his movements were rhythmic, making it difficult to detect. The more he followed behind, the more suspicious Kwan became. Because the person in front of him moved without any natural appearance, as if he was searching for something. After following the person in front for a while, the person in front finally stopped unconsciously, standing behind the electric pole. Kwan now did not know where he was anymore. Because he was not from this village, this commune, the surrounding area was dark, making it very difficult to determine. How could this person come here at this hour? As soon as he asked the question, Kwan saw the other person bend down slightly. At the same time, one arm lowered and extended forward. Something seemed to have crawled out from inside the person's long, loose sleeve. And when he strained his eyes to look closely, Kwan realized that it was like a poisonous snake. At this point, Quan was even more certain of his suspicions. It was not by chance that the first two victims in the village were identified as having died from poison. It was very possible that it was the poison of the snake that the mysterious person had released. After waiting for about 5 minutes, Quan saw the other person take action. He slowly stood up straight, then approached the gate, gently pushed it with both hands, and then walked straight inside. Quan did not stand still either. He quietly observed and then followed right behind the other person. When he reached the gate, the door inside the house closed. His intuition was telling him that something bad was about to happen. So he stopped being cautious and walked towards the house with more speed. However, it seemed that it was too late. As soon as he reached the door, a creepy sound came from inside and went straight to Quan's ears. His intuition told him that he couldn't think of anything else and pushed the door open and rushed in. Inside, everything was dark and quiet. The soldier kept his posture defensive, his eyes fixed on the room where a curtain was constantly swinging back and forth. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, the soldier quietly advanced. When he was only about 2 steps away from the curtain, suddenly from the other side, something pulled the curtain and rushed towards him. A flash of shiny metal tore through the thin sheet and headed straight for the 4 soldiers. May had been on guard beforehand, so he was able to dodge the fatal knife. Before he could do anything else, a hulking figure shot out from behind the thin sheet like an arrow. The soldiers reacted by reaching out to pull it back. However, he was a beat behind that person. "Stop quickly!" Quan shouted loudly and chased him out. But by the time he reached the yard, that person's figure had already disappeared deep into the courtyard. With such a fast speed, Quan was not sure if he could chase that person away or not. Not to mention that there were still matters to be resolved inside that room, so he had to let that person escape. Quan clenched his fists and frowned, then quickly turned back inside the house. Attached, so someone reached out to turn on the light switch. The light bulb hanging on the wooden pole in the middle of the house lit up, occasionally swaying slightly when the wind blew in from outside, still giving people a somewhat ominous feeling. And it was true. Looking at the floor now, still stained with blood that had not dried yet, he hurriedly lifted the piece and went inside. Quan stood there, frozen. Another person had died on the wooden bed. This time it was the body of a girl, surrounded by blood. Drops of still warm blood continuously fell to the floor, creating a pattering sound. It sounded small, but was enough to give people a creepy feeling down their spine. Damn it! Quan clenched his fists and cursed, then walked closer to the victim. Just like the 2 previous victims, this girl had her chest cut open and her heart taken out. Only her face was still intact. Maybe it was because Quan had just come in at the right time that the murderer didn't have time to do it. Silently walking out of the room, Quan collapsed into a chair, his hands raised and his face buried in his face. Quan was blaming himself. If he had been more proactive just now, perhaps this tragic incident would not have happened. Perhaps he would have caught the suspect of this case. What a bastard. Quan got angry again, his hands clenched, his face full of anger as he kept pounding on the chair. However, at this moment, no matter how angry he was, the dead could not be brought back to life. Quan regained his composure. He needed to inform his colleagues about this. However, he did not bring anything with him that could be used to contact them. Running back now would be impossible. Tone stood up and went outside to ask the neighbors to contact him, but Quan saw the landline. Phone on top of the cupboard. Luckily, it was here. Quan mumbled and then went to remember the number of the guard post. Quan immediately dialed the number and dialed. The first ring passed, but no one answered on the other end. Quan hung up and muttered, "Where did he go?" After about 5 minutes passed, Quan picked up the phone again and dialed again. Luckily, this time a voice answered. "Hello, this is the head of BT District Police Department. Is this Mr. Duke?" This is Quan, deputy head of the district police investigation team. Yes, I'm listening. There is another murder case happening in Nod Village. Please help me inform everyone. I am at the scene, so it is not convenient. Another murder. Yes, hello, I will inform everyone right away. Duke's voice on the phone was somewhat surprised. Then he hung up, leaving behind a long ringing sound. However, Quan did not blame him because he knew the seriousness of this case. Putting the phone back in its original position, Quan then searched for the flashlight in the house and went outside. Since he didn't know where he was in the village, he could only go outside and wait for his team to find him. After standing there for 15 minutes, Quan saw a flashlight coming from ahead. When he got closer, he realized that it was Mr. Min and the shaman riding together. Someone died again, officer. They stopped the bike and asked with serious expressions. That's right, the victim this time was a woman, very young. So could it be Mr. Ho's daughter? Let's go in and see. After Quan's words, Mr. Min Ming stammered and wondered. To answer this question, Mr. Dong immediately waved for everyone to come in. Once inside the house, the scene once again made Mr. Min and Mr. Dong feel embarrassed. Mr. Dong turned to look at Quan and stammered. Mr. Quan, did this just happen? Quan nodded. That's right. I've encountered the culprit. Unfortunately, I was a step too late to catch him. Quan replied with an angry expression, his hands clenched. Did you collide with that guy? Did you see his face clearly? Mr. Dong's eyes flashed with hope as he asked again. However, Quan's answer made him feel disappointed. He was wearing a black hooded shirt, and it was dark in the house at that time, so I couldn't see his real face. Then this case still can't be solved. Mr. Dong sighed and said again. After a few sentences of conversation, the sound of a car siren came from outside. Very quickly, a team of 6 people, including the forensics, came from outside. How many people are here? The county police chief also came here personally today, looked at the people and asked, then went straight to the military and continued. You didn't just show up here, did you? Mr. Kwok's question seemed to raise a suspicion for Quan. It was true. It couldn't be that Quan would just show up here like that. Quan immediately explained, last night I went down to talk to encourage back men, and I didn't leave until after 9 o'clock, but on the way back, I accidentally came across a somewhat suspicious person. That's why I decided to stay and watch him. When he arrived, partly because he was indecisive, Quan stopped talking and lowered his face slightly. Mr. Kwok seemed to understand now. He put a hand on Quan's shoulder and nodded. I understand. Mr. Kwok's eyes then turned back to look at the others. Just one glance, and everyone seemed to understand. No one said anything and immediately started working. Outside, the sound of cars and voices also woke up the neighbors. Seeing the official car appear, their intuition told them that something bad was happening, so they immediately jumped up and ran over to take a look. When they learned that another person had died in the village, everyone fell silent. 2 hours passed. It was now past 11 p.m. The crime scene investigation had been completed. The police had also cleaned up and taken the victim's body away. At this time, only a few people were standing outside the victim's house. One of them shook his head and said, first it was young men. Now it's women who have been murdered by him, and yet he even entered the house to kill them. It's really too reckless. This is the 3rd case that has happened, and the police have not found the culprit yet. If this continues, I'm afraid our village will be wiped out. Everyone stop talking nonsense, go home, lock the door carefully, and go to sleep. Tomorrow morning, we'll have to help Mr. Ho's family with a funeral. Poor thing, the couple has only been gone for a day, and this has happened. I wonder how those 2 will accept this truth when they return tomorrow. After what the uncle said, everyone clicked their tongues and sympathized with each other. Everyone go home and rest. At the district police station, the meeting room was currently lit up. All the comrades from the criminal investigation department were present. Mr. Quack stood above everyone and said in a harsh voice, "I don't know how you guys investigated, but it's been half a month since the investigation was established, and you still haven't found any clues. And yet you let the perpetrator kill another victim. If this continues, we will lose all trust from the people." At the words of the king, everyone bowed their heads. It was not that they were not responsible for the case, it was just that everyone had tried their best. In the past few days, no one had had a chance to rest. However, facing them this time was a very famous person. Other than the poison on the victims, there were no other clues. "Sir, although this incident is very regrettable, and the investigation at the scene did not yield any breakthrough clues, thanks to this direct contact, I have more or less identified the appearance and age of the perpetrator. If we use that to narrow down the investigation, I think we will quickly find that evil enemy." Everyone turned their eyes to Quan, a look filled with hope. "All right, it's very late now. Comrades, go back and rest. Tomorrow morning, we will meet again to discuss this matter." When everyone stood up and left, the large meeting room now only had Mr. Quack and Quan left. Quan just walked over, his face sunken as he said, "I'm sorry, this incident happened largely due to my wrong decision. Wait until the case is solved. I will stand up and accept all disciplinary action." Mr. Quack is staring at you now. It's still a pat on the shoulder to encourage you. He said, "Your biggest responsibility now is to quickly find the culprit. Let's talk about the rest later." "Okay, now go back and rest. There's still a lot of work to do tomorrow." "Don't worry, give me a few more days. I will definitely find the culprit and make him take responsibility before the law." Quan's eyes became determined, responding to Mr. Quack's words. Returning to the temple, the master and disciple stayed up until midnight waiting for the demon to appear, but in the end, there was still nothing. Tuong was now both hungry and cold, so he turned to ask Master Van, "Master, when will that thing appear?" Master Van was still calm, his face very certain of what he had just said. "I think it is about to appear." Master Van's answer made Tuong feel even more restless. However, another hour or two passed, and everything around the temple was still very quiet. Mr. Van's expression also changed a bit. Mr. Tu questioned himself and turned to the wall. He was no longer awake and had fallen asleep. It had been more than 3 hours. Why was there still no movement? Could it be that I made a mistake somewhere? Mr. Van asked himself, then leaned back against the pillar, his eyes slightly closed, partly to rest, partly to think about what he had deduced. Time passed more and more quickly. It was already 4 a.m. I thought we should get up. I thought I was called by a whisper. I thought I was lying on my side, drooling from my mouth. When I was disturbed, I turned from side to side. My eyes were busy. "Get up and go home. We can't stay here until morning." Master Vante still shook the person and continued, "Teacher, wait for me a bit." Tuong yawned and opened his eyes. Then after a while, he was able to get up. So it was not yet dawn. The teacher and student packed up and left the temple. The distance was only a few dozen steps to get home. However, it looked like the walk was very difficult. Because last night, Tuong didn't get much sleep, just tossing and turning, half awake and half asleep, partly because of the cold cocoon when the night fell, and partly because he was afraid that the demon would suddenly come and take his life. When he returned home, as soon as he opened the door and entered, Tuong went straight to the bed and threw himself down. He turned his head to look at Teacher Van and said, "I'm still very sleepy, teacher. Let me rest a little longer. When it's morning, I'll get up and prepare food for you." Knowing that I didn't get much sleep last night, Master Van didn't say anything. Besides, eating and drinking weren't important. He smiled and replied, "You just rest. When I need you, I'll wake you up." Master Van said that and left me to rest, while he quietly walked out to the yard. The sky outside was now a little brighter as the first rays of dawn appeared, followed by the chirping of birds. Standing under the longan tree, Master Van's face fell slightly. He thought to himself, is there really no ghost in this village? The recent cases were actually caused by a perverted murderer. But have you heard about his purpose for killing? The son of Mr. Ho is dead. Just as he was thinking, his teacher heard a woman's voice coming from outside the gate. Startled, Mr. Van immediately walked out, looked at the two women, one carrying a load and the other carrying a bag, and watched Mr. Van carefully. Lone, that pretty girl. How did she die? She was killed just like Hai and Ton, by their hearts gouged out and their faces slashed. Where were her parents? Why did they leave her at home alone like that? The guardian went to the province to visit his son, who had left the day before yesterday, and where had he returned? Leaving the little girl home alone. Unexpectedly, such a heartbreaking thing happened. Hearing the conversation between the two, Master Wanming's expression changed. He immediately opened the gate and went outside. His mind was in a constant state of thought. There was indeed something wrong with his reasoning. That was why this murder happened. If it was really the work of a demon, it would have come to his place last night and thought it would be there. It would be impossible for it to appear in another place like that. Walking on the village road, I saw a few people passing by gossiping about the recent death. It was not difficult for the master to find the victim's house. Standing outside the gate, there was a group of people gathered together and talking. However, there were no officers in sight. Maybe the incident happened last night and they have already cleaned up the scene. Could you tell me if a murder just happened here? Mr. Van took the initiative to join the conversation. Yes, sir. Since last night. An uncle turned to answer his friend's question. Was he related to Tuong? Why didn't he go with him and then go out alone this early in the morning? A person who saw Mr. Van looked familiar asked, He's still sleeping, uncle. I woke up early and had nothing to do, so I wanted to go out for a bit to refresh him. Mr. Van smiled calmly and replied. His eyes then changed, looking intently from the gate to the inside of the house, as if he was sensing something. Very quickly, Master Van did not bother everyone anymore. He turned around, smiled, and said, I will not bother everyone anymore. I will take my leave first. Someone has just passed away here. It would be better if everyone did not gather together. Before turning around and leaving, Master Wan added, leaving the place where the people were standing, Master Wan walked a distance and then stopped and turned back. His eyes narrowed slightly, his mouth mumbled. It was true that this was not caused by a ghost. Gia walked faster and returned home. When the gate opened, Master Wan saw Tuong stretching and writhing outside the well. He didn't ask and went straight inside the house. I thought he didn't know that there was another death in the village. Seeing the teacher's worried and hurried expression, it was not difficult to understand why he ran inside and asked, What's the matter, teacher? There's another death in this village. Teacher Van shook his head thoughtfully and answered, Another death? Tuong asked in confusion. That's right, but didn't you and I stay by the temple last night waiting for that thing? Hearing Tuong's question, Master Van also had a hard time explaining. He thought for a long time before saying, What I put out was to lure demons, but it has no effect on humans. So there are no demons. Tuong asked his friend in surprise. This could not be confirmed, but this morning when he heard the news, he immediately went there to check. If it was really done by a demon, there must still be some remaining demonic energy there. But you can't feel anything. Seeing Master Van hesitate, he thought he should ask again. Master Van V replied uncertainly, No, I can still see a little bit of demonic energy there, but very little, but I'm sure the person who died today was not done by a demon. After Mr. Van's words, the space suddenly became quiet as both teacher and student sat in silence. After about 30 minutes passed, Mr. Van suddenly stood up. Seeing that, Tuong asked, Where are you going, sir? Mr. Van answered with a determined look, To identify the person who caused this incident. Do you know who it is? Tuong asked in surprise. Master Van did not answer, his eyes still filled with determination. Thinking that seeing him like that, he did not ask any more questions. He went to close the door of the house and returned to the master and asked, "Where do you want to go?" "I will go with you. Please take me to the house of that master named Ton." "Is that right?" "Yes, I will take you there." Tuong hesitated but did not ask, because he also knew that Mr. Van was currently suspecting who was responsible for the recent deaths in the village. It only took about 15 minutes for the villagers and commune to have Mr. Van and Tuong near the house of the teacher named Ton. "The name is Mr. Ton's house, sir." Standing about 10 steps from the gate, Tuong pointed to Mr. Van and said. Mr. Van narrowed his eyes and muttered, "Looks like we have to go inside." At first glance from the outside, the house didn't look special at all. Compared to the surrounding houses, it was just a flat-roofed house, looking a bit more spacious than the tiled-roofed houses next door. "Are you going inside?" Tuong asked. Master Van nodded. "That's right, if you don't enter the tiger's den, how can you catch the tiger cub? When you get inside, just say that I'm a relative of yours and that I'm here to ask you to look at the feng shui of the grave, and let me take care of the rest." "Yes, don't worry, I'll tell you what to do." Then both master and disciple headed straight for the gate, peeking inside. Tuong called out loudly, "Teacher Ton, is Teacher Ton inside the house?" After a few calls, the door inside Mr. Ton's house opened, revealing a man about 51 or 52 years old. His face looked gentle and a bit sad. Ever since the day Teacher Ton lost his daughter, his face always looked sad like that teacher. Tuong turned around and spoke softly to Mr. Van. Mr. Van nodded, his eyes still fixed on Mr. Ton with a questioning look. You, Tuong? What happened that you came here to find me so early?" And here he was standing behind the gate. It took Mr. Ton a few seconds to recognize Tuong. He then opened the gate and asked, his eyes also glancing slightly at Mr. Van standing next to him. "This is my maternal grandfather. He passed by here on his way home from work and has been staying at my house for about a week now, Uncle." As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Van smiled and added, "I heard that he was someone who knew about feng shui, so I asked my nephew to take me to see him to see the land next to my house." "Oh, I see. Please come inside." After listening, Mr. Ton smiled and invited the two master and student to go inside the house. Stepping inside, what caught Mr. Van and Tung's eyes was a large altar. On the altar were placed many offerings from candy to fruits. Incense coils were burning, with smoke billowing. Just looking at that was enough to see that Mr. Ton was a person who took worship very seriously. Inviting the two of them to sit down, Mr. Ton poured some water for both of them, then asked Mr. Van, "I wonder what you brought me here for today?" Mr. Van took the cup of water, took a small sip, then smiled and replied, "It's because I have a son who wants to build a house this year. I'm here and I know about you, so I wanted to come here to ask if it's a good year for them to build a house." Hearing Mr. Van's answer, Mr. Ton smiled and nodded. "I can see this. Please give me your brother's age. I will help you see." Mr. Van nodded slightly and read out an age. After listening, Mr. Ton fell silent and reached into the desk drawer to take out a pen and a piece of paper. He wrote attentively for a while, then looked at Mr. Van and slowly said, "He was born in the year of Kintai, and this year is the year of Kinthin, not suitable for building a house. If he builds this year, he will easily commit a disaster, and the homeowner will easily fall ill. Business in the future will be difficult to achieve as expected." Hearing Mr. Ton say that, Mr. Van's face became serious. He nodded. "That's right, my son just wants to do it, and does it right away. As our ancestors used to say, if you wait too long, shit will turn to mud. He's afraid that if he doesn't do it this year, he'll never be able to do it again. However, building a house cannot be done as soon as one says it will be done. A person saves up all his life, and suddenly he finishes building it but gets into trouble. It is better to not do it anymore. You should go home and tell him about this. If you want, wait until next year to do it. If you need to see anything else, you can tell him to come here directly to see me." Mr. Ton nodded, his voice persuading, thanking him. "I will tell him tomorrow when I go back." Mr. Van still had the same expression and nodded slightly to continue. Sitting and talking at Mr. Ton's house for about 30 more minutes, Mr. Van took the initiative to find an excuse and asked Mr. Ton's permission. Mr. Ton simply thought that Mr. Van came here to see normally. So when Mr. Van wanted to leave, he was not angry, but happily said, "If you two are busy, you can go home first. If I have something to see, I can come here. If it is within my ability, I will definitely help." "Thank you. Today, I am lucky to have you read my fortune like this," Teacher Van happily continued. Mr. Ton then nodded slightly and saw the two of them out to the gate. This time, Teacher Van did not leave immediately. He slowed down a bit, waited for Mr. Ton to go all the way inside the house, then quietly turned around. In front of Mr. Ton's house, Mr. Van took something out of his sleeve. Then he furtively buried it under the ground. Tuong stood there, feeling strange, and was about to go over to see. But very quickly Mr. Van straightened his back and turned around. "What did you just do?" Tuong asked, confused. Mr. Van did not answer, but only smiled. From then until he returned home, his expression seemed to be more relaxed, not the heavy, pensive look like when he first arrived. "I will finish this now, but I still have to ask you to do some things." As soon as he stepped into the house, Mr. Van looked at Tuong and spoke immediately. Hearing Mr. Van say that, Tuong looked surprised and asked, "Could be that Mr. Ton is the one who caused the cases in this village?" "That's right, he did those things because he wanted to revive his daughter." "Teacher, what are you saying? Want to revive her daughter? How could there be such a magical magic in this world?" After hearing what Teacher Van said, Tuong's face became extremely unbelievable. Teacher Van then took a sip of tea and nodded slightly. "That's right, a dead person cannot be brought back to life. However, in the world of magic and sorcery, it's different. There are many ancient books that record the resurrection of the dead. All of them are very cruel, using the lives of living people to practice. So is it really possible to revive the dead, teacher?" Tuong asked with wide eyes in surprise. "Those are just records for blind fanatics who do not think about the consequences. And even if those methods of description were true, reviving the dead would be against the will of heaven. Man proposes, God disposes. When disaster falls from above, the karma they must pay is even 100 or 1,000 times heavier than death." Master Van replied, his eyes looking outside with a hint of sadness on his face. "But how did you know that? Why did you confirm that Master Ton was the culprit?" Tuong hesitated for a moment and then asked again. "When I was in his house, I sensed the smell of energy. It is very possible that he is hiding his daughter somewhere in the house. As for whether he really wants to revive his daughter or not, we will find out tonight. For now, just do as he says and avoid pulling the strings. Forrest." Tuong Gaonan shook his head, then looked at Teacher Van and said, "Yes, if you need anything, I will do it right away." Teacher Van nodded, then leaned close to Tuong's ear and mumbled something. Tuong listened attentively, then looked at Teacher Van and asked again, "Is that all, teacher?" "Yes." Teacher Van nodded. Tuong did not ask any further questions and stood up, then took his rickety bicycle and walked straight out the gate. Teacher Van, who was left alone, also stood up and went inside the house. He went straight to the wooden bed and laid down. Teacher Van wanted to rest a bit before ending this matter. Perhaps the teacher had anticipated what he would face tonight. It would not be simple, not like what he had previously planned, and even the spell. Teacher Van was not sure he would win. Tuong cycled away without knowing where. Until early afternoon, he returned home. Seeing Teacher Van resting on the bed, Tuong did not say anything. Whatever he did it gently for fear of disturbing the teacher's sleep. Time passed quickly, and it was already late afternoon. Knowing that the teacher had not eaten anything at noon, Tuong stayed home early in the afternoon to prepare dinner. When Teacher Van Took woke up, Tuong took the initiative to say, "Teacher is awake. I have prepared dinner. Please sit down for a moment while I go down to serve the meal." "Thank you." Teacher Van nodded slightly, thinking that he would not say anything later, and quietly went downstairs. A moment later, he appeared carrying a tray of food. The two of them sat down to eat together. The conversation only revolved around Teacher Ton and the girl. After finishing dinner, he let Tuong clean up, while the teacher himself sat upstairs arranging the things in his basket. The small kerosene lamp was also taken out by the teacher as if he was about to use it. When he thought he would return, he asked him about the time, but at this time, Teacher Van just waved his hand and said, "That thing will appear tonight. I also dare not guarantee that anything dangerous will happen or not. So to be safe, it is better for you to stay home." Hearing what Teacher Van said, Tuong immediately shook his head and looked away. After all, he had been going back and forth with the teacher for the past few days. Now that it was the last straw, and he told Tuong to stay home, he definitely wouldn't listen. Teacher Van saw that Tuong was determined, so he reluctantly agreed. He clicked his tongue and nodded, then took out the yellow talisman from the day before and shoved it into the wall's hand. He said, "Then you should keep this talisman. In case something uncertain happens, it will also help you run away." He took the talisman with both hands, thinking of keeping it inside without any further questions. The two then closed the door and quietly left to the temple. The scenery and atmosphere of tonight compared to yesterday were not much different. When everything felt from this place was still just gloomy and a bit cold. "Will that thing really appear today, teacher?" I thought at this moment. I stammered and asked Teacher Van. "I am sure." Teacher Van answered with a very firm and certain voice. "Okay, let's go in there to prepare some things." Teacher Van continued, then raised the lamp and walked straight into the temple. Under the statue of the saint, Teacher Van sat cross-legged, facing out the door. The bronze bell, the talisman, and the wooden sword were also brought out by the master. "They are here now. You can sit in the back there." Master Van turned to speak to Tuong, his eyes looking towards a pillar. Hearing what Master Van said, Tuong had no objections and nodded, then quietly went to sit there and see what Master Van would do next. Only to see Master Van still sitting quietly in front of the things that had been laid out, he would occasionally raise his hand to press the charm, as if waiting for something to come or not. A moment of silence passed. Master Van then also took the first action. He picked up the bronze bell, his other hand held a charm, and began to cast it. The sound of the bronze bell rang, breaking the silence. The teacher's mouth was constantly mumbling spells. The night sky was already a bit chilly. The wind outside was coming from nowhere but was constantly blowing in. That made the space even more mysterious. Sitting with his back against the pillar, he felt like he would shiver every now and then because he didn't know what would happen next. Suddenly, Master Van threw the talisman he was holding in his hand up high. The talisman from his hand burst into flames, emitting billows of white smoke. The bronze bell in his other hand also rang out. Repeating the ringing, Master Van stopped and put the bronze bell down. His eyes began to focus more and look towards the darkness ahead. Time passed in a flash. Another strong wind blew, causing the old, faded door to continuously creak. The only light from the oil lamp he had brought along was extinguished by the strong wind, causing everything to suddenly be plunged into darkness. "Teacher, teacher, what should we do?" In that atmosphere, Tuong could not hide his fear and immediately stammered to ask Teacher Van. Teacher Van did not answer, but only let out a sigh, his eyes still not leaving the darkness before his eyes. Not hearing an answer from Teacher Van and continuing to sit in the dark like this was not the way, Loamo stood up and went to relight the oil lamp. When the light was shown on, Tuong stood behind, eyes filled with awe, mouth filled with stuttering. It was Master Tan's daughter. Master Van did not show any surprise. He only glanced slightly at the thing that was gradually appearing, then signaled for Tuong to be quiet. The shadow gradually got closer and closer. When it passed the threshold of the temple, it suddenly stopped. Face to face, Teacher Van also no longer sat still, but slowly stood up straight. She was a girl in her 20s. Her skin looked pale. Her eyes were lifeless and soulless. Her face was the most noticeable thing. A face that was no longer intact, full of holes like it was necrotic. Teacher, do something quickly. Tuong looked at the girl and was frightened. His mouth kept urging. But Mr. Van did not do anything. He still stood silently, his eyes not leaving the girl. It was true that there was still someone standing behind. As soon as Mr. Van finished speaking, a cold wind blew in from outside. It made the two doors that were wide open move slightly and make scary creaking sounds. They're here. Mr. Van's expression changed, and he immediately took a few steps back. The girl was still standing there without making any movements. Her eyes were still lifeless, but beside her were now a series of black smokes that were constantly swirling. And then very quickly, those black smokes seemed to be controlled by magic and rushed towards Mr. Van and Tuong's position. As if Master Van had faced this kind of ghost soldiers many times, he did not show any surprise at all. He quickly pulled out two talismans, clamped them in his hands, and brought them up to his chest while reciting the incantation. With just a wave of his hand, the two talismans in Master Van's hands immediately burst into flames. The black smoke rushed towards him, and Master Van's hands and mouth recited the incantation. Two invisible sources of energy collided. A pale yellow light flashed and then went out. The space was then returned to normal. The wisps of smoke no longer appeared inside the temple. But things did not stop there. Looking at the many things standing before her eyes after the golden light just now, it seemed that she had awakened. No longer the soulless black eyes, instead, a pair of eyes were constantly changing to a pale red color. But also realizing that abnormality, Master Van immediately pulled out 3 yellow talismans that had not been drawn yet. Another fingertip of his was brought to his mouth. He wanted to use his own blood to draw the talisman. 1, 2. Then the 3rd talisman. Very quickly, his friend used his own blood to draw it. He held the 3 talismans in his palms to show that Van had read it wrongly. Finally, he threw it forward. Strangely, the talismans that were thrown out kept falling and hitting the ground. They floated in the air, as if there was some kind of string holding them back. Master Van spoke, and a fluttering talisman instantly flew straight to the position where the girl was standing. When it got close, the talisman immediately caught fire. A white smoke spread out and surrounded her, causing her to seem to react. The girl's arms and legs moved back and forth, followed by a slight jerk. But that was all. The wide-open door now creaked and slammed shut. The atmosphere in the temple suddenly changed. A gloomy cold enveloped it. Standing behind the pillar, one would have to shrink one's arms to keep warm. As for his friend, he still focused and repeated the action with the remaining 2 talismans. When the last talisman was released and ignited, the thing facing the 2 people could no longer stand firm. Her body swayed and then slowly collapsed, lying flat on the cold ground. Master Van immediately curled up and sat cross-legged, his eyes closed, his breathing gentle as if regulating his body's vital energy. It seemed that the magic he had just used had backfired quite a bit. "Teacher, are you okay?" Tuong stood there and saw that everything had calmed down before he trotted over to Teacher Van. He sat down next to the teacher and asked in a small, worried voice. Teacher Van opened his eyes and let out a long breath. then turned to look at Tuong. He raised his hand to signal that he was okay, then slowly stood up. Teacher, is that a human or a ghost? Looking at the girl lying on the cold ground, he had not seen her do anything since the beginning, so he did not know if she was a human or a ghost. What do you think a dead person will become? Teacher Van asked with a faint smile. So that means it is a ghost, but why didn't it attack you? Tuong asked again. Master Wan looked at the girl, then sighed and replied, it can't be called a ghost. Because this girl died without any resentment, she didn't come back to life for no reason. Ordinary people like you wouldn't be able to see it. Master Wan laughed slightly and continued. Thinking that he was dumbfounded after hearing this, he then said, the grave did not rise from the dead for no reason, so our thoughts today were correct. As soon as the statue finished speaking, the temple door opened, revealing a man with dragging steps, his mouth still stained with dried red blood. Teacher, Ton Tung stammered. The exhausted man who was walking in was the teacher named Ton. He looked more haggard than ever. Just this morning, his skin was still rosy and his body was firm, but now he was shriveled and lifeless. As soon as he placed his body inside the temple, he immediately grabbed onto his daughter, who was lying on the ground. His eyes then looked up at Tuong and Mr. Van, a gaze that made others feel both pity and blame. The dead cannot be brought back to life, and doing so would be against the laws of heaven. Mr. Van spoke, his eyes never leaving the father and son in front of him. Oh my God, what did my daughter do that made the heavens take her life? The law of heaven? I have done good deeds for half my life. So why did the heavens take away my most precious thing? Mr. Tom looked at Mr. Van and replied with a bitter voice. Mr. Van sighed. Your best friend works in this profession. I think you should understand it the most. Do I need to answer any more? Hearing Mr. Van say that, Mr. Ton just looked up and laughed loudly, then looked at Mr. Van with indignation and continued. Just a little bit more and my daughter could have returned, but you appeared and ruined everything. Do you believe in those evil spells? Do you believe that the dead can come back to life? You are so blind. Master Van shook his head in disappointment and replied, Today, my karma has not been fulfilled. Even if my father and I die here, I will not forgive your family. Mr. Tom looked at Master Van and spoke with a voice full of resentment, then immediately pulled out the small knife he had brought with him, as if to end his own life. However, once again, the door to the temple opened. And this time, the people who came in were Mr. Min, Mr. Dewey, and the shaman from the commune police. It was not by chance that these people appeared here. Everything had been planned by Mr. Van. This morning, he told Tuan to go out to discuss the matter with Mr. Min, to speak out his suspicions on behalf of Mr. Van, and also to tell Mr. Min to send someone to follow Mr. Tan tonight. When Mr. Min heard Tuong talk about suspecting that Mr. Tan was the one who had the heart to kill 3 people in the village, he did not believe it at first. I also knew that simply because Mr. Tan lived in this village and was loved by everyone. Now, if he suddenly accused him, no one would believe it. As for Mr. Min, he didn't believe it, but after thinking about it for a while and talking to Tuong, he finally made a decision. The case was at a standstill, so he thought about it and expressed his doubts. Although he respected Mr. Tan, he couldn't ignore Tuong's doubts. To be fair, he would listen to Tuong's opinion. Anyway, if Mr. Tan is not the culprit, as long as he does not reveal this, it will not affect anything. To be sure, Mr. Min later asked Mr. Dewey and Mr. Dong to come with him tonight. And now, when the people present here heard what Mr. Tan just confessed, witnessed what was happening before their eyes, everyone was very disappointed. Facing Mr. Tan, there will probably still be death, but it will be a clear death, a sentence for the things that he himself has caused, just because of blindly believing in things that can never happen. Today's story ends here. Thank you, author Gwen Lauren, for a very good collection of stories, and thank you for accompanying Fawn, completely ending the life of a man with a beastly heart that even animals would be fair to. Thank you, dear listeners, for your attention. I bid you farewell and hope to see you again in the next stories. Please leave some comments below the video. Good night, everyone. Yeah.